Hi everybody, my name is Anna and I'm super excited to share with you today my PowerPoint presentation on the film Super Size Me by Morgan Spurlock in 2004. Just to kind of give you a really quick rundown so you know what's happening in the documentary. This is a super interesting film where Spurlock basically runs an experiment where he only eats McDonald's 3 meals a day for 30 days. And he has doctors very closely monitor everything that's going on inside his body throughout the entirety of the experiment. And he also raises like so many really cool ethical questions throughout the film about what McDonald's was doing, about personal responsibility. It's very interesting. Let's dive right into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so that you can see my PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. Just going back to the beginning. I am titling this presentation Super Size Me: Truth, Temperance, and Love of Neighbor in Fast Food Marketing. Um, there is a quote that I wanted to share with you guys that I thought went so perfectly hand in hand with this entire presentation. And that is one by John Adams, our second president, where he said, our Constitution was designed, or I think he said was made only for a moral and religious people. Okay, so that is kind of a core truth that was going along with what Spurlock was arguing throughout this entire presentation or throughout the entire documentary. What that basically means is that we're never going to argue throughout this whole presentation, or that, that Spurlock wasn't doing this either, that McDonald's shouldn't be allowed to do this or that. We're talking about whether what McDonald's was doing was morally okay, right? So when you have, just like this quote was talking about, when you have a state that's set up with so much wonderful freedom as we do, it really only works well, right, when people are acting morally, or else you have chaos. So that's what Spurlock is talking about in the documentary, and that's kind of like what we're talking about too in this presentation. So just keep that in mind as we go along. My thesis for this presentation is, when practices predictably harm health or obscure truth, they violate the ethical laws of honesty and love. Firms should redesign information and defaults. There's so much to unpack there. We'll get into it. My guiding question for this presentation is going to be, is upselling and kid marketing ethically acceptable? That is like something that Spurlock was trying so hard to unpack and understand throughout the entirety of the documentary, because he really wanted to know, is McDonald's doing something morally okay or not okay by marketing so specifically towards children, by pushing their food that's causing so much damage for people so heavily, right? So those are the questions he's asking. Also, keep in mind as we go along, we're going to be looking at these issues from an ethical lens of Christian ethics, from the ethical lens of utilitarianism by Mill, and deontology by Kant. So we'll get a super well-rounded perspective here at the end. We're going to see all of those things play out. Biblical foundations. I will never just like spew an idea out at somebody without giving them a reason as to why I believe it. So, as we go along through this presentation, as we're unpacking what's happening throughout the documentary, just keep in mind that these verses are my core truths. These are our proof for why the things we're talking about are right or wrong, moral or immoral, right? Because if we don't have a guiding light, if we don't have something to go back to as truth, then we'll never get to the bottom of these questions. So this is my proofs, my foundation, if you will, for this. The Super Size Me prompt. This is super interesting. Throughout the like entirety of the documentary, Spurlock is very disturbed that, and he's like raising the ethical question of if it's okay or not, as to why McDonald's is every single time you used to order there, they would ask you if you wanted to supersize the meal. Spurlock thought this was unethical. He thought that it was not okay or not morally right for McDonald's to just be like dangling obesity causing foods in front of people's faces and pushing them to um, order more food. So basically, the question is, Is it right to design prompts that predictably push people past their healthy limits, especially when the harms are well known? Okay, so that's kind of the question here. This chart, not going to go super in detail on it for the sake of time, but just so you know what it is, this is a list of claims from the documentary, proofs of the claims, references, whatever, so we can kind of see and more, like better understand some of the real issues that Spurlock was having with his physical body throughout the documentary, or just some issues that are like proved um, to be caused by McDonald's or whatever. Like, for example, the idea that ultra-processed diets are linked to early death, higher intake of ultra-processed foods correlates with increased all risk of mortality, all cause mortality. That's from Harvard 2024. Just like some, I just threw this chart in here. I created this myself just so that we could have like a really good understanding of like, okay, what bad things were McDonald's actually causing? Why are we arguing for these things against them? Why was Spurlock arguing these things against them? Just so we know what's really going on. From a utilitarianism perspective, okay, so utilitarianism says that right action maximizes overall well-being. If scripted upselling increases intake across millions of orders and raises population level risk, the net utility goes down. That's really huge, guys, because utilitarianism is basically arguing that no, what McDonald's was doing by pushing their marketing in front of children and by pushing it so heavily on people that this does not maximize the overall well-being. So therefore, utilitarianism will argue that it is not the right decision. This is just another chart about obesity. Not going to go into detail on it. Don't have time. Look at it. It's extremely important to understand the facts, the statistics behind it. Marketing to children, toys, characters tied to meals, presents near schools, all these things that Spurlock was arguing were not okay. He did not think that it was okay for McDonald's to really be pushing so heavily their obesity causing products or food in front of children. From a Christian lens, we know that the Bible tells us to guard the vulnerable. So, from the Christian perspective, it's not okay or not morally okay for McDonald's to be trying to so heavily push their food on children, since we do know that it causes so many health issues. And also from a utilitarianism perspective, it is not considered ethically okay, as we just looked at. Again, this chart, can't go super detail on it because of time, but this was something that Spurlock was extremely interested in finding out, the actual causes. Why are we so obese? And he found that marketing from places like McDonald's was a big cause. You can read this if you want to. That was a big deal for Spurlock throughout the entirety of the documentary. The deontology analysis from Kant. This one is super interesting too, because Kant teaches us to treat people as ends, not merely means. Designing promotions to exploit children's limited agency is a form of instrumentalization. Okay, even if sales rise and the ethical truths or duties or whatever, they still have a hard time upholding respect and truthfulness. So even deontology would argue that what McDonald's was doing by pushing their products in front of children, deontology would argue that it was not ethical either, because that is not a form of treating people as ends, right? Like that's not okay with deontology. I think it reflects a lot of the Christian perspective again. So it kind of all goes hand in hand there. Then I kind of move on here. Counterpoint and reply. It's just personal responsibility. That's almost always what you're going to hear the counter argument be, and absolutely yes. Absolutely. I did a lot of research to try to figure out what would people actually say to counteract this. What would they say? Well, it's not McDonald's fault that we're all obese. It's a personal responsibility issue. Absolutely, yes. 1,000%. Of course it is, right? Like we know this. But we also know that there is a huge factor that is played into the environments shaping our choices. So we have to keep that in mind. So the counter argument is it's just personal responsibility. And kind of my reply to that is, yes, that's true, but also like what Mill said, reduce predictable harm. What Kant said, don't manipulate, and what Christians say, don't make your neighbors stumble. So I think from these three ethical lenses that we can kind of see both sides there, if you will. Um, Recommendations. Basically, protect the children, right? Temperate defaults and point of choice transparency, right? Like these are my recommendations or things that I've come up with that we could like put in place. So what does that actually look like, right? It looks like McDonald's having full transparency with what they're selling us and not having Spurlock talks a lot about in his documentary, like there were so many hidden ingredients that were not being labeled on the McDonald's nutritional when they would list their nutritional value or whatever. So just full transparency on McDonald's and then that doesn't mean that we have to boycott McDonald's. That means that we can support them and they can support our health, right? Like it can go both ways. So what does this look like? Company action, customer initiated upsizing, plain language, menu boards. I think that that's fair. My conclusion, utilitarianism, Christian, and deontology lenses covered on basically they're all similar reforms, right? So that means that we both need to tell the truth. We as consumers need to understand that it is partially our responsibility, and McDonald's needs to understand that they probably don't need to be trying so hard to push this on us. So, and then I have my references, but just to wrap it up for the sake of time, I really hope you enjoyed this, and I'm really looking forward to reading everyone else's.